right, welcome to the Turks. Jake, you and Annika Sparring on a lovely, fascinating Monday evening.
It's an okay evening.
It's an okay evening, everybody.
It's cloudy here in LA. It's been freaking cloudy all spring long. I'm sick of it. Okay, I'm sick of it. All right, all this freaking overcast. Oh, it's gonna burn off, except it never does. Like, what is this? Seattle? Portland? It's supposed to be LA.
We didn't sign up for Seattle.
We didn't. Sorry.
Not that there's anything wrong with Seattle. All right, anyways, you guys get it. All right, guys, it's gonna be an interesting show. And so, you know what, without further ado, let's just hit them.
We're gonna start off with some foreign policy, starting with this.
President Biden has informed the G7 allies here that the United States has agreed to allow Ukrainian pilots to begin training to fly American-made F-16 fighter jets. This move represents a major reversal for Biden and a wish fulfilled for Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, who has pleaded for F-16s for months.
Oh goody, an escalation of war. Now, in this case, as you heard in that report, the Biden administration will now allow our European allies to transfer American-made F-16s to Ukraine, something that was considered a red line by the Biden administration previously, especially when we're dealing with another nuclear power, Russia. And of course, Vladimir Putin has responded to this by threatening nuclear war with the United States, which is unsurprising. It's not the first time he's done it, but maybe sending over offensive weaponry to Ukraine, not the best idea. And there is no end in sight for this war. In fact, the idea of sending F-16s to Ukraine makes it abundantly clear that the United States and its allies intend to continue engaging in this war for at least 18 months, possibly more, because there's some training necessary in order to ensure that members of Ukraine's military are able to operate F-16s. We'll get to all those details in just a moment. Now, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has been asking for F-16s since the beginning of this war, and the United States, under Biden's leadership, had refused to do so. They saw it as an escalation of war. The next video has some more details on this.
The F-16, the backbone of the US air fleet, can travel twice the speed of sound, drop bombs on ground targets, and fire air-to-air missiles. Ukraine believes these planes provide a distinct advantage in the skies, enabling them to shoot down incoming cruise missiles and fighter jets, fending off Russia's punishing air assaults. But up till now, providing F-16s has been a red line for President Biden, reluctant to provoke an unpredictable escalation from Russia. Still, in a February interview with David, Biden did leave the door open just a crack.
We know President Zelensky continues to say what he really needs are F-16s. Will you send F-16s?
Look, we're sending him what our seasoned military thinks he needs now.
You don't think he needs F-16s now?
No, he doesn't need F-16s now.
That was what he said in February, but clearly he has now changed his tune. Now, for the moment being, there's no indication that the United States is gonna transfer its F-16s to Ukraine. It's just that our allies will be doing so, but let's keep it real. Eventually, the United States will be doing so as well, because it's an opportunity for, we know what it's an opportunity for. Send them more weapons. That creates a need for the United States to replenish its weaponry. And that means more money for the defense contractors who are absolutely salivating over this war that is now quickly becoming an endless war. And I'll explain more of that in just a moment. But Cenk, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in.
Yeah, so guys, the administration is partly worried about it because it's an escalation. I would say that's the minority concern. They're not really talking about the majority concern, which they mentioned in some articles, but they mentioned it in passing as if it's the smaller concern. I don't think so at all, for reasons I'll explain here. The larger concern is they don't want the technology to fall into the wrong hands, mainly the Russian hands. Because it's one thing for the Ukrainians to have an F-16, it's another thing for an F-16 to get shot down in area controlled by Russia, where they could then just take the F-16 and reverse engineer it, right? And so now you might think, well, okay, that's a real national security issue for us because the F-16s are excellent and it's a rare thing we do right in the US military in terms of technology. And so that could be a national security problem for us. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit of a concern too. But the larger concern is the people that sell the F-16 don't want anyone else to be able to produce cheaper F-16s without going through them. i.e.
that's
the defense
concern.
contractors.
Oh, you know what? That is the most important part of the story, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, God forbid that these defense contractors, these military these military grade weaponry manufacturers have some competition. I mean, that's the real war we should be concerned about, Uger.
Exactly, but isn't it interesting that the media doesn't mention that?
No, it's not interesting. It's the most expected part of the story imaginable.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we went through the same thing with the M1 Abrams tank earlier in this war. And so the defense contractors are super nervous about their beloved technology, which they have now taken billions, if not trillions of dollars off the hands of US taxpayers and taxpayers in Northern Europe, et cetera. That technology falling into hands that would allow them to not have a monopoly on those weapons, okay? And so that's the iceberg of this story that no one else is talking about. By the way, also true of the so-called Pentagon accounting error that you might have heard about. We're gonna talk about that later in the show.
Now, John Kirby, who's a spokesperson for the White House, sat down for an interview about this new decision to allow for F16s to be sent to Ukraine. And the big question is, doesn't the Biden administration see this as an escalation of war? Why the 180 on this topic? Well, he claims no, not at all. Let's watch.
Just a short time ago, the Kremlin responded, calling this a, quote, colossal risk. President Biden's concern from the very beginning with providing F-16s was that it could potentially escalate this war. What assurances does the US have from Ukraine that they won't use these F-16s to fire into Russia that could widen this war?
I will tell you, Peter, we have had multiple conversations with the Ukrainians about the risk of escalation here. Nobody wants to see World War III. And we have made it clear that we're not going to encourage or enable Ukraine to strike inside Russian territory. Now, the Ukrainians have been very honest with us and very forthcoming and quite frankly, very responsible when it comes to the kind of support we're giving them, not using that to go inside Russia.
Cool, I'm sure Ukraine would never do any type of offensive attack or would never even consider attacking Russia.
Yeah.
Except here's a story that broke today. Ukrainian official confirms group of Ukraine-allied Russians crossed into Russian territory and attacked town. Let me give you some more context, but before I do, Cenk, seems like you have some thoughts on this.
I do. Listen, guys, the Ukrainians are not going to want to violate an agreement with America because America could cut off further weapons, et cetera, that they need. So would they attack the Russians right away? No, unlikely with the F-16s. But it depends on how desperate they get. So let's say they think that we're not going to send them any more aid, which is a possibility at some point. They think, well, we already have the F-16s, and understand why they might want to use them inside Russia, because Russia is firing missiles at Ukraine from inside Russia. And the only way to stop those is to bomb them inside Russia. So it only depends on how desperate the Ukrainians are. Once they have them, they have them.
So can we just at least be blunt about how this is an escalation of war? Come on, Cenk. Really?
It is.
Like
I know.
You really think Ukraine is under the impression that if they violate any agreement with the United States, that the United States would stop sending them weapons? Are you insane?
No.
Come on.
And look, there's a reason why we would care. And we don't want instability because that could affect the stock market. So it's not like we have any pure motives, but we do have motives for not escalating past this. But this is definitely an escalation. And by the way, don't get me wrong. Will we escalate even further? It's enormously possible.
This is a disaster.
But guys, there's the theater as always and the real world as always. And the theater is, my God, we care about those brave Ukrainians. And is there some truth to that? Yeah, I think there's some truth to that for some people, right? But that's mainly the theater. When you get to the real world is how much are people gonna make off of it? And so it's not just the defense contractors, it's also the oil and gas industry. And we cut off the Russians' gas supply into Europe. Now we're replacing their supply. So, and then there's the banks who gambled on the gas, and there's the banks who gamble on the defense contractors. So there's a world like probably hundreds of billions of dollars here, definitely on the line for all those different industries. And they're constantly sending lobbyists to talk to politicians, including the White House, lobby, to make themselves more money. They don't care about our interests, the Ukrainian interests, et cetera. And that is what's driving a lot of these decisions while the press puts on a play about humanitarian this, America's worried about escalation that, when in reality, most of the decision makers are worried about how much money everybody's gonna make.
Let's discuss the decision makers, shall we? Namely, the national security advisor who played a key role in persuading Joe Biden to allow for the transfer of the F16s to Ukraine. And that person's name is Antony Blinken. Now, what was Antony Blinken up to after he was advising the Obama administration on foreign policy in Afghanistan? The same foreign policy that extended and expanded upon Bush-era trash foreign policy. What did he do after that, right? That little space in time where it was between Obama and now the Biden administration.
Humanitarian work is my guess, hop guess.
No.
Working with the homeless.
No interest in that. In fact, he was part of a consulting group specifically having to do with getting defense contractors in the same room as government officials.
No, really? In essence, lobbying for defense contractors between government jobs at State Department? Huh? Well, golly gee, I bet this is giant news to the people in Washington, and the reporters are gonna clamor to cover this obvious conflict of interest.
So as Washington Post reported, let's go to graphic 5 here. Blinken played a similar role when NATO was at an impasse over whether to provide modern tanks to Ukraine. At the time, Germany was hesitant to approve the transfer of Leopard 2 tanks. Leopard 2 tanks, a roadblock that was overcome when Blinken pushed the White House to approve the transfer of M1 Abrams tanks over Pentagon reluctance. Now, prior to Blinken serving as Secretary of State for Biden's administration, Blinken ran a defense-related consulting firm known as West Exec. In fact, when Biden tapped him to be part of his administration, I remember researching this and writing a piece on this because I thought that there was some conflicts of interest here. And surely with the development of this war in Ukraine, the conflicts of interest are pretty brazen and pretty obvious. So West Exec did not respond when asked for a list of its clients, but according to people familiar with the arrangement, they include Shield AI, a San Diego-based company that makes surveillance drones, and signed a contract worth as much as $7.2 million with the Air Force to deliver artificial intelligence tools to help drones operate in combat missions. Blinken and Michelle Flournoy, another person who is close with Biden, have served as advisors to Pine Island Capital, which raised $218 million for a new fund to finance investments in military and aerospace companies, among other targets. So Blinken has a history of working on behalf of defense contractors and getting them sweet deals with the federal government. And that's exactly what I see here. I see this as an opportunity to make money for these defense contractors. It's pretty disgusting because I don't trust, do we really trust the Pentagon when they can't even pass a single financial audit? They haven't passed one. Do we really have trust and faith in them in regard to where the military weaponry is ending up? Do they have a full accounting of it?
No, of course not. Don't be ridiculous.
Okay.
And so all of this is to enrich those folks. But guys, at the same time, the Ukrainians should get our help, and the Russians definitely invaded them, and they were definitely wrong, and it is definitely an imperial exercise. And so we're stuck in the middle ground here, where we want to help. Good people like us want to help the Ukrainians.
Okay, then push through peace talks
without getting robbed in the process.
Yeah, peace talks. Okay, we don't actually. The United States government isn't actually interested in ending the war. Let's be 100% honest about that.
Well, that's definitely true because they're not encouraging peace talks because that is not in the Ukrainian interest, if you ask me. And the reason is that the US has a separate interest is because the longer the war goes, the more Russia is depleted. And from our national security interest, the people in charge want Russia as depleted as possible.
It's a proxy war.
So since it's a proxy war and we're not the ones that are directly involved, Russia is, they're the ones that are getting weaker and weaker and weaker as their military gets depleted and run into the ground. And even if they quote unquote win and get parts of Ukraine, still their military will have been devastated, their pipelines will have been shut down,
or
the sanctions will have
blown up.
Or blown up, and that literally happened, and it's probably one of our allies, if not us directly. And And so we will take advantage of all of the things that happen because of the war. And so but that puts good people in the same basket as people who have no interest in humanitarian issues and are just trying to make a buck off this. And it's an uncomfortable basket to be in.
And keep in mind that this is solidifying the alliance between Russia and China. So while this is a proxy war and the thinking among the State Department is that this is weakening Russia, it is also strengthening its relationship with China. I should also note that China happens to be one of the countries that is pushing for peace talks, but the United States, because of its interest in wanting to weaken Russia, is really unwilling to push for that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the United States intends to continue this war for at least 18 months, if not longer. If you don't believe me, take a look at this final video.
President Zelensky has been begging for them for more than a year. President Biden has resisted until this point. So what changed?
Nothing changed. I mean, we have been evolving our support for Ukraine as the war has evolved. And when we're talking about fighter aircraft, that's really not designed to help us in the immediate future here with the counteroffensive.
The training alone, John, could take 18 months, the defense secretary.
Well, that's an initial estimate. As the war has evolved, we've also started to have conversations with the Ukrainians about long-term defense needs, because when this war is over, whenever that is and under what conditions, they're still going to have a long border with Russia. They're still going to need significant defense support.
So at least 18 months just to train the soldiers in Ukraine how to use the F16s, at least 18 months. So no end in sight. Let's just be absolutely clear about that. And in those 18 months, I'm just curious, how many times does the Biden administration intend to tap Congress to appropriate hundreds of billions of dollars more to assist in the war effort in Ukraine?
Yeah.
While, by the way, simultaneously nickel and diming the American people, right? Right now, Biden is engaging in negotiations with Kevin McCarthy to raise the debt ceiling, and he is seriously considering work requirements for Americans who are so poor, who are so poverty-stricken that they would need to prove that they're looking for work or engaging in work in order to get welfare benefits that they clearly need because they're struggling financially. So nickel and dime the American people, continue this now new endless war with Russia. It's a proxy war. It's just, I don't know. I think that the way the US has now decided to handle this is pretty disastrous and continues to get worse.
So some estimates have them being trained by the fall. It's impossible to know. But the bottom line is Ukraine is doing a spring and summer offensive. They will definitely not, the F-16s will definitely not be ready by that offensive. But I also want to temper your expectations there because I see a ton of BS in the mainstream media. Honestly, nothing but BS in that regard. Why? If you are new to politics and news and you didn't follow what happened during the Iraq War, Afghanistan, etc., you might not know that whenever the New York Times starts writing about a new offensive and around the corner after that, we're gonna win the conflict, that is untrue 100% of the time. I heard that same story in Iraq, I don't know, 80 times. Oh, a new offensive and then we're gonna end the insurgency right after that. It never ends, it just goes on and on and on forever, for decade after decade. And every time the Pentagon says us or our allies are doing a surge and we're gonna win right after the surge, it is literally never, ever true, okay? So don't buy that load of crap. And then the last point is, so as you saw him there, well, even after the war, we're gonna have to keep sending them weapons. In other words, we found a nice little piggy bank here. And we're gonna turn this into, one way of looking at it is Israel, where we're just gonna give them billions of dollars in defense spending paid for by the American taxpayer.
Great.
And going straight to defense contractors who one day will probably hire me for millions of dollars. Oh, that's the part of the sentence he didn't complete, but is also definitely true.
Which is great, because the US economy is dealing with a surplus right now. Just a wonderful surplus, and we have unlimited resources to spend on forever wars. Great. Anyway, we're gonna talk about a cute little accounting error that the Pentagon has admitted to when we come back from the break.
during the social break. Let's go to members as usual. Shy Coltrane 42 says, did anyone else catch TYT on C-SPAN this weekend? Just elevating TYT. I caught it, Anna caught it, because we were on there.
I definitely caught it. It was at 6 in the morning local time.
Yeah, and so thank you for noticing that. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I thought we had a kind of a blast on there. I don't think that they were used to what we were saying at all.
Definitely not. The host said that I look glamorous, and so I'm in favor of that show.
Yeah, God bless. I'm sure she was thinking the same thing about me, but it's like that's another topic. But anyway.
Yeah, she didn't want to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Wolf Dragon Donna says, "Oh boy, it's going to be a salty show." Love you, Anna.
Thanks.
Okay.
It is.
Thank you, Donna. Kabuki Dragon writes in, am I alone in thinking Biden is going to cave to the GOP and grant them every last concession on the debt ceiling? So then the GOP will blame Democrats for betraying veterans, the Democrats will blame everything on progressives? I have no hope left. I don't know that every detail of that is correct, but you're on the right track. So
just know this, Biden will agree to concessions that he really didn't need to agree to at all.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you need to know.
Look, I want to save it for the next time we do this story, the longer explanation. But bottom line is the minute Biden agreed to negotiate, he agreed to take 50% of the blame when the negotiations don't work out, which is as dumb a thing you could do politically as possible when you didn't have to negotiate at all. Okay, Just Jim writes in, endless war. Please explain your solution to end this war. Maybe the F-16s could end the endless war. Jim, I wish that were the case, but the F-16s are not going to end the war. They're going to go back and forth. They're going to give the Ukrainians a big lift that they need. I get that, but it'll likely lead to a longer stalemate. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't get them. I'm not clear on what should happen in that case. I wish we could have decision makers that weren't enormously biased by the money and the lobbyists, and then we could have a little bit more peace of mind that they're making the decision for the right reasons. But right now, I don't have that peace of mind at all. But Jim, I also want to tell you, don't get your hopes up that they get the F-16s and magically by the fall they win, right? That is unlikely to happen. Trump's Lady Lump says, Anna, was the United States getting involved in World War II also an escalation? Was that also a disaster? Well, I would say you have to take every instance by itself, right? And be able to look at it in its context and its facts. So not every war is World War II.
You're comparing apples and oranges, okay? Russia invaded Ukraine. Ukraine was open to peace negotiations until the United States government discouraged them from engaging in peace negotiations because the US saw this as an opportunity to weaken Russia. So they saw it as a tactical move, they engaged in the tactical move, and so now we, the United States taxpayers, are engaging in escalating a war that could have ended, yes, with Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine maybe giving up some territory, something that they're not even considering now because of the United States dissuading them from considering it.
And I'll say
so it's apples and oranges, okay?
But
comparing it to World War II is ridiculous.
Look, I'll tell you this though. You can make the same argument for Syria. Russia goes into Syria. Why don't we intervene like World War? Back on TYT, Arlie Bird 42 has gotten the worm and given it to you guys, gifting a Young Turks membership. That was an interesting analogy. We appreciate members looking out for one another, and you could join through the join button. You could also upgrade through the join button below the video if you're watching on YouTube, and everybody else, of course, tyt.com/join. You know it, Casper.
Well, the Pentagon is fessing up to an accounting error, which shouldn't be surprising considering they can't even pass a single audit. But with that said, let's give you the details on that story.
There was this very bizarre admission from the Pentagon this week of an accounting error that suggested that the US has at least $3 billion that it didn't know it had that it can use for Ukraine aid. That's a hell of an accounting error, and it provides a lot of fodder to critics of US aid to Ukraine and critics who say there's not enough oversight going on.
Jake Tapper grilled National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan about the Pentagon's recent claims that an accounting error has freed up at least $3 billion worth of weaponry that could be sent to Ukraine in its war with Russia. Now, let's hear how the so-called error allegedly happened in the first place.
Are you concerned about this accounting error?
Well, one thing I just want to make clear, that is not money that went out the door and disappeared. That is not a waste of that $3 billion. It is simply a tally of how much military equipment we have given them. And the way that the Pentagon was counting it was, what's the replacement cost for the equipment we provide, rather than just the actual cost of that equipment. Once you make that adjustment, it turns out we have an additional $3 billion that we can spend to provide even more weapons to Ukraine. And at the end of the day, not one penny of US dollars will have gone missing or have been misallocated. It will all be provided in the form of equipment to Ukraine on the battlefield.
The Pentagon can account for a ton of money that they've been given by Congress. We'll get to that in just a moment. But to give you an example of what he's referring to in the way things were calculated and why this accounting error happened in the first place, the Wall Street Journal wrote that, for example, the Pentagon overstated the cost of replacing the M777 howitzers it provided to Ukraine by looking at the price tag on the HIMARS mobile missile launcher system, a far more advanced system slated to succeed the older artillery pieces in the US arsenal. Overall, that cost difference resulted in an overcounting of $75 million, a Pentagon official said.
Yeah. So let me tell you why this is a disaster for the US taxpayers and why it's not at all an accounting error. It's a decision they're making so that they will quadruple the profits of the defense contractors. So how? Very clear, okay? So let me explain it this way. And let's use hypothetical numbers. We know that the 3 billion is the number they're talking about. But I'm gonna give hypothetical numbers for the rest. So originally, in this hypothetical, the Pentagon says, okay, we're gonna give $6 billion to the Ukrainians. What is it paid for, okay? So let's say in this hypothetical that it pays for 100 howitzers. That's not the actual price, obviously, okay? Well, now when they go, oh wait, we were pricing them at what we would need to pay to get those 100 howitzers. But what we really should do is price them at the howitzers' current value, because we're not giving them the new howitzers, we're giving them the old ones that we had in stock. And those are not worth $6 billion, they're worth only $3 billion. Boom, we save $3 billion. So now, instead of giving them 100 howitzers, we can give them 200 howitzers. But wait, that is not the replacement price. We're gonna have to pay the replacement price because we're going to replace them for our stock. Now, when you go to replace them, not only are they $6 billion, the actual original price that they calculated, but now we've given twice as many to the Ukrainians. So now they're gonna have to charge us $12 billion. So it's because we're gonna be buying, in that hypothetical, 200 howitzers at the new price, not the old price, okay? So that means the defense contractors are not gonna get 3 billion, they're gonna get 12 billion.
Oh, thank God.
Okay, so that's why they, oh golly gee, we noticed an accounting error that would quadruple our profits. I mean the defense contractor profits. We don't care about that. We're just doing this for the Ukrainians. So that's how this game is played.
It's also worth noting, just to respond to some of what Sullivan said in that video, that the Pentagon doesn't seem to have the ability to account for much of their funding. In fact, they can't pass a single audit. Literally, they have failed every single audit that has been done. So the Pentagon, which has an annual budget of about $860 billion, has long been plagued by accounting errors that has never had a clean department-wide audit, most recently failing an external study by multiple firms last year. Mike McCord, who serves as the Pentagon's comptroller, this admission was so incredible, right? Because he wanted to downplay it. He's the comptroller for the Pentagon, and he's like, it's not really that big of a deal. Okay, guys, let's just all relax. He says, quote, I would not say that we've flunked we have very big numbers here at the Department of Defense, so we can have numbers that may look big that are still quite accurate.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
What?
Okay, that means, yes, we did flunk, but we flunked at such a spectacularly large number that you shouldn't worry about it because it's buried in an even larger number. It's like waste within waste. It's like one of those Russian dolls of waste. So since that overall number is so gigantic, don't worry about it. That's the world's worst explanation. Like they're not even trying.
No, not. I mean, it's laughable because we have no say. So we can insult the American people with a statement like that, and what power do we have?
Yeah.
What say do we have, especially when it comes to foreign policy?
Yeah, so everything is about concerted media battles. Being honest with you guys. So if you're a progressive, what you should do with that, and Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders, they chip away at it and they talk about defense when they talk about the debt ceiling things. They never win, right? But how would you even have a fighter's chance of winning? Well, what you would do is you would figure out, okay, how much did the audit say we're missing? So it's gonna be a giant number, 100 billion, 200 billion, but let's take a simple 100 billion, okay, out of the 860. Say, hey, listen, it looks like you guys are wasting $100 billion because you can't even account for it. I mean, that's just beyond outrageous. It's by definition waste if you don't know where it went, right? So we're gonna cut the defense by $100 billion until you can tell us where it's going, okay? And so because we don't, it's one thing to spend it on weapons, it's another thing to just throw it in the garbage, okay? Now they can do a concerted effort on that and just pound away at Republicans. They're throwing $100 billion in the waste, they're ruining the deficit, they're ruining the debt, they're ruining the economy. Where's the $100 billion? It coordinated, you all go on TV at different times, etc. But there's no one planning anything on the progressive side. So they're not gonna do that. The corporate Democrats, which is like 80-90% of the party, agree with the Republicans. They all have the same lobbyists from defense contractors. So they're just gonna laugh at us. They're all gonna laugh at us as they waste hundreds of billions of dollars and go, yeah, I don't know where it went. Yeah, but we wasted so much money, who cares? Ha 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 ha. And the press will barely notice, and the band will march on.
Now, finally, the United States approved a whopping $113 billion in funding for Ukraine in 2022 alone. There are reports, kind of bragging about how no new money was appropriated recently. So for instance, fresh funding for Ukraine wasn't included in the Pentagon's budget request for the fiscal year of 2024, which begins October 1st. Department officials and defense contractors had expected funding to come from a separate supplemental request this summer and hinge on the progress of any Ukrainian offensive. Meaning,
it will not hinge on that at all.
There will be more money.
There's definitely going to be more money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, by the way, though, during the debt ceiling negotiations, they'll cut all the money that was going to you guys.
Yeah, notice not one Republican from the House who's currently making a big to-do about the government's budget and the deficit, the debt. Oh my God, we need to cut spending. Not unwilling to cut any spending on defense.
Not only that, they're also unwilling to raise tax on the rich by $1. That's their red line, protect the rich at all costs. And yet, what do you see all over mainstream media? Theater about how the Democrats and Republicans, golly gee, they all care so much about the debt and the deficit, except they only want to take it from you and never from the powerful and from the lobbyists.
All right, let's move on. Big correction on a story we covered on Wednesday, and this one has a lot of twists and turns, so buckle up.
Stories about how homeless veterans are being displaced by migrants. Is that true or is that false?
It is really troubling, and I'm asking our local and state authorities to investigate what happened here. It was clearly fabricated, and it was a conscious decision to fabricate it from what we are getting.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams says that the claims regarding veterans getting displaced from housing by migrants in homeless shelters and other housing was completely made up. In fact, even Laura Ingraham, of all people, made a correction in regard to that story on Fox News. Let's take a look at that.
A little update on a story we brought you this week about homeless vets being displaced from hotels so that illegals could move in. Turns out the group behind the claim made it up. We have no clue as to why anyone would do such a thing, but we'll bring you any updates should they come.
Now we're gonna get to the group that made it up, particularly one nonprofit and one specific individual who went to great lengths to not only make up that story, but to make up evidence for proving what her claims were. But before we get to that, Eric Adams is calling for something to be done. Let's take a look at what he says here.
Those who put together this scheme and put together this plan to really put a negative light on what we coordinated to do to send migrants throughout the entire state, a real decompression strategy. And I think that decompression strategy should be throughout the entire country at all. But we never displaced veterans. Someone fabricated that story and it was blasted across our local tabloids and papers. And it's really unfortunate that someone would do something like this.
Not only is it disgusting and unfortunate, I mean, you don't need to make up something like that to push for, let's say, resources in some of the cities where migrants are being sent to. These cities are struggling with lack of resources to deal with an influx of migrants coming to their cities. And I think the federal government needs to do something about that. But before we get to the person who lied about this and the extreme lengths in which she went to in order to lie about this, I wanted to get your thoughts, Cenk.
Yeah, there's a shocking twist in the story, and you saw half of it. One is that a Republican legislator got really mad that he got tricked by this right-wing organization, and he's part of the folks who exposed it. And then Fox News, you saw their retraction. I'm totally shocked by that.
Me too.
Because there are false stories like this in right-wing press nonstop. There's just a giant pipeline of total BS that they make up 24/7 that goes right on to Fox News. No one cares. No one ever corrects anything. The Republican legislators are in on it. They love the BS and they press the BS forward, etc. So for a legislator to go, hey, you know what? It turns out this was a lie, and I don't like the lie, even though it helps me politically, so I'm gonna expose it. I was like, I haven't seen that in like decades. And partly I think it's because it's at the local level. At the national level, they do this stuff on a regular basis. And so Project Veritas will edit videos in the old days completely out of context. They'll target a certain group. The Republicans will use it knowing that it's totally BS, and they'll crush that group. They'll strip it of all its funding. The Democrats will go along, etc. That's how this game is usually. Fox will all hype it up knowing that it's total BS. I don't know if the Dominion lawsuit affected Fox at all in this regard, but this is pretty unprecedented for the right wing to go, yeah, sorry, we were making that up. Because that's what they usually do and never admit.
And look, I don't think Fox News had any role in making this story up. The heart of this is one woman who runs an organization, a nonprofit, who lied to everyone and even used homeless people to push the lie. So I'll get to that detail in just a moment, but first, who am I talking about here? Well, Sharon Tony Finch, the CEO of the nonprofit Yerrick Israel Tony Foundation, said that homeless veterans under its care had been kicked out of upstate hotels to make room for migrants bust from New York City. But the story has fallen apart, culminating with state assemblyman, and this is who Cenk was talking about, Brian Maher, who's a Republican, who had been advocating for the veterans in national media and in the state legislature, denouncing it as false in a call with the Times Union. So Times Union debunked the story, and they did so with the help of this Republican assemblyman in New York. And so here's how he was duped. So at a Wingate Hotel in Fishkill, Maher spoke with two people claiming to be veterans who were displaced from the Crossroads Hotel in Newburgh, which has received 110 migrants sent by New York City. Now, he even spoke to a purported driver who transported the displaced vets. However, here's what actually turned out happened. One of the purported veterans told a reporter that he had been recruited to take part in a scheme designed to perpetuate Tony Finch's story. 3 men currently staying at a homeless shelter said they were among a group of 15 people recruited to portray homeless veterans displaced from upstate hotels by incoming migrants. So Maher started to get a little suspicious about this story. And he was like, look, I need some evidence that your nonprofit was actually paying to house homeless veterans. Like, let's start with that, provide some evidence of that. So at that point, Tony Finch goes to the bank with him. He's in his car waiting outside the bank, allegedly for 3 hours. And she comes out and provides the evidence. And this is what the evidence looked like, okay? So it looks like a bank statement. Let's go to graphic 4. And when he provides that evidence to his colleagues, they're like, I don't know, that kind of looks like it might be digitally manipulated. By the way, why was he waiting outside of the bank for 3 hours? It doesn't take that long to get financial documentation proving that you were paying for the shelter for these homeless veterans. Nonetheless,
I just got to jump in for a second,
sure.
Anna. So there's actually 2 different things. So first he asks for evidence. She sends what looks like that doctored credit card. They go, hey, this is, his staffers go, this doesn't look real. You should go and get actual receipts with her from her bank. That's when he waits 3 hours in front of the bank, and she never even shows because she doesn't have the receipts. So,
No. My understanding was that he waited outside of the bank for 3 hours the first time. The second time he goes thinking that she's gonna show up to the bank, but then she just never does. It doesn't matter. There were 2 different occasions in which he demanded evidence. The first time, this is what she provided in the form of evidence. The second time, she just didn't show up to the bank.
Yeah, that's definitely right.
Yeah, so basically she was a liar. According to Maher, quote, she alluded to the fact that, quote, maybe it's not exactly how I said it was. So she lied. And not only did she lie, she used homeless people to pretend to be veterans in order to push this lie.
Yeah, but she probably has to be stunned thinking, I'm the one right winger they're gonna call out on a lie. I thought I was doing my job. My job is to make up a story. Then the Republican legislator picks it up, and then Fox News calls it official because the Republican picked up to mention the story, and then everybody thinks that there's litter boxes in every high school because the kids are getting dressed up as cats and they're all furries, right? This is how we make things up. Now all of a sudden I'm the bad guy? What the hell, why'd you turn on me? Is my guess as to what happened in her mind. Like, cause this is kind of what they do 24/7. So, but again, I'll credit where credit is due. So to that Republican legislator in New York, thank you for caring about the truth. And thank you for representing your party well. Like, this is the first time I've seen a Republican be honest in, like I said, like decades. Yeah. So hey, that's a tiny bit of hope. And look at Fox News correcting something. Like, we correct stuff all the time. That's not new, because a lot of times people in the press get it wrong, and then it comes to us. And then, a lot of that we sniff out. We're pretty good at sniffing it out on this show, right?
Yeah, but even this, like on Wednesday, you weren't on the show that day. I was covering the migrant crisis, and a lot of these cities are struggling, right? This was a tiny part of that story.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, we got to correct it. But I can understand why people would fall for it.
Yeah, I totally get it. And so my point is, like a normal news organization, when something gets an update and you realize, oh, that's not exactly how it was portrayed before, you come in and you say, hey guys, we want to make sure you know the real story, and you correct it. But Fox, they are not well known for that, to say the least. So now after the Dominion lawsuit, here they are correcting a right-wing story that turned out to be BS. That's an interesting development. So there's a silver lining in this story.
All right, it's graduation season, which means we've got some fun culmination speeches to get to, including one featuring the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. Come right back, we'll share that and more.
Let's start with YouTube Super Chat in this social break. Jason Ray writes in, prior and during World War II, the military-industrial complex had not been established and entrenched as bad as now. Read Eisenhower's speech. So that's exactly right. So back then, when FDR says we got to go to war, he has more credibility than our leaders today, who are stuffed all of their pockets filled with defense contractor bribes from the military-industrial complex. And now we don't know if anything is honest, if they really have good intent, or they just got bribed to do what they're doing. So that's a giant difference. R. Stone says, I need one reporter to ask what is the return on investment specifically and directly to the American people for these funds and equipment going abroad. They won't, of course, ask that. And I think that that was a tough question to ask, because if we were earnest and we just wanted to protect the Ukrainian people, yeah, I think there's a little bit of a return on investment on that too, because of peace, stability in Europe and elsewhere. But I wouldn't want to measure that in just return on investment financially. But they're never going to ask that question anyway, because how are you going to pay for that is reserved for only programs that directly help the American people. Those are frowned upon by media, but if you're talking about spending trillions in defense, they will never, ever, ever, ever ask, how are you going to pay for that? Timothy Morgo writes in, I hope you guys talk about how Fox News admitted to putting out a fake story about homeless veterans being kicked out for migrants. Check, mission accomplished, we just did. Look at that being responsive. Chef Rockstar says, every time I listen to Cenk and Anna talk, I feel like my IQ is raised 20 points. I love this show and I love what you both do. Thank you so much. Well, that's awfully nice of you. I appreciate that. That's wonderful of you to say. Sam Wodlewski, the one, writes in, I understand being anti-war, but as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, I remember people wanting to be anti-war then. It didn't stop Hitler. That's my fear. I still love TYT and want it to end. And Cenk, love you all. Well, Sam, thanks for saying that. And guys, again, on the apples and oranges, I wouldn't even say apples and oranges. It's just we have to make a distinction at some point. Otherwise, we could use that same idea to say, well, we got to intervene in Syria, right? Because Russia's doing almost the same thing in Syria and helping Assad, the butcher of Syria, to kill his own people, etc. So let's go rush into Syria just like it's World War II. But not everything is World War II. It's just a little bit more complicated, and that doesn't mean you don't help the Ukrainians. We've been in favor of helping the Ukrainians all along, but at some point we're beginning to worry that it's just being used as a piggy bank to make people richer and not necessarily helping the Ukrainians that much more. Hash Squatch says, so we got the equivalent of a pinky promise from Ukraine. To be honest, in essence, yes, of course. Once they have the equipment, they can use it for whatever they want. That's just true. Early Bird 42 says, cheers to the mods for keeping the chat a cool place to be. Oh, and today's my horse's 14th birthday. We listen together. Could Charmy get a shout out? Well, that's a new one. All right, Charmy, you win. Happy birthday. And mods are awesome. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. More news.
Well, let's go to this next story.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present David Zaslav for Boston University's honorary degree.
The Warner Brothers Discovery CEO, David Zaslav, was the commencement speaker at Boston University. And when he took the stage, as you can see in that video, some people not too happy about it. And it has a lot to do with the ongoing writer's strike, which has been ongoing for the last 3 weeks. Now, we have some more fun clips to get to and also some photos from the commencement to also show you. But first, we need to just back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about how Boston University could, not have picked a worse speaker at this moment, considering the writer's strike. So the writer's strike officially started on May 2nd. Just 2 days later, Boston University announced that Zaslav was their commencement speaker. Now, Zaslav is getting a lot of pushback because of the writer's strike, because of what his pay is compared to what writers make. So for instance, he made almost 250 million in 2021 alone. A lot of that, meaning 200 million worth of that 250 million was in the form of stock options, which is usually how incredibly and fabulously wealthy people get paid. That's how a lot of executives get paid. And side note, part of the reason why is because it encourages them to cut costs, meaning costs associated with labor, to increase profits. And when you increase profits, the value of those stock, the shares of that stock goes up, and he gets paid more as a result. So that's, it's an incentive to cut costs, especially when it comes to labor. Now, most Americans do in fact support the writer's strike. So the studios might not, but the American people do. For instance, according to reporting from More Perfect Union, overall 71% of Americans with an opinion back the writers in their dispute. The survey indicated that the dispute has high visibility with the public, with more than 80% of Americans polled saying they had an opinion on the ongoing strike. The poll found overwhelming support for the strike that cuts across racial, gender, age, and even political lines. Even 63% of Trump voters with an opinion on the strike do in fact back the writers' efforts, while 37% of those same Trump voters back the studios instead. And that's of course represented by the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. By the way, guys, don't be surprised that Trump supporters would be in favor of labor-related efforts. A lot of them are workers themselves. We need to stop pretending as if we don't share anything in common. But that's a side note. Now, before I get to some of the fun videos and pictures from the response to Zaslav, what do you think, Jake?
Yeah, so look, your company does well, you get rewarded in stock options, etc. I don't have that much of a problem with it. The question is, how'd you get there? And so if you're doing it by just cutting employees when you don't need to, that's a different question. And in this case, they're in the middle of a strike, and the workers are asking for 429 million more per year, and that's a small slice of the profits, right? And in the media industry, there is tremendous profit, generally speaking, and the industry has counter-offered 86 million. The reason I'm giving you those numbers is because remember, and by the way, I have a different number than you do on Zaslav's salary from the last 2 years, and it's probably because of differences in the stock prices, etc. And so in my source, it's at 286 million over the last 2 years. So let's be fair to the guy and say, and divide that by 2 and say he's averaged over 140 million in those 2 years. That's already more than what they're offering the writers. Just one CEO out of the entire industry. If they just took his salary and gave it to the writers, they'd already be nearly doubling what they're offering the writers today. To give you a sense of context for when they say, oh, golly gee, we just don't have the money for it.
Okay, just to give you a sense of what kind of person Zaslav is, I didn't know about this. He apparently just scrapped a movie that was already completed, totally finished, the Batgirl movie.
Yeah.
He scrapped it for a tax deduction, a write-off. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that. So look, guys, there's a larger story of why they're doing all this cost cutting in the first place, and that's a super interesting story. So, but I want to get to that after we show you what they did to this guy. And I love what he was talking about when they started booing him, and I want to talk about that too. So let's go to the videos, then I'll give you the whole story.
All right, so there were 2 instances in which they started booing him, like very aggressively, and one of the times had to do with his statements about, he's like complaining about how difficult his life was as a lawyer. Let's watch.
You've got to figure out what you're good at and what you love doing. I graduated from law school right here at BU, and I got what I thought was everything I wanted. I got a job at a big prestigious firm in New York, an apartment in New York, and I was making good money. I was feeling really great.
he's so out of touch. Like, that's the thing. You're
100%.
so out of touch, and he doesn't know it. He doesn't know it. Times have changed, and he still thinks that it's like Pimp My Ride time. And like, what was the other MTV show where they would like go to people's houses and it was like, oh, look at my nice house. Cribs. Like, that era's gone, okay? People are freaking struggling. Those college students, their future is so uncertain and so unstable. And the homeboy is like, oh, I was a lawyer and I was living the good life. I had that apartment in New York. Like, shut up.
So the whole speech was like that. And it's funny you said that he was out of time because
out of touch
with the times, right? Yeah. You're right, he was. He did seem out of time when they started booing.
Out of touch, you're out of touch, or time, right? Yeah.
Okay, nobody saw that coming. So he's out of touch. I thought as I watched the speech, this is a good speech from like 1986, 1994, in that ballpark, right? This is all of the graduation speeches from that era where they would come and they'd be like, well, I had this spectacular job coming out of the prestigious school I came out with, this one, right? And then I decided to turn it down to pursue my passion, but it turned out I got an even more spectacular job. And then I got $286 million because I was so spectacular. And in the middle of it, he was telling a story. And that's another point where he started getting booed about how Jack Welch, when he used to work for the legendary businessman Jack Welch, who ran GE, etc. And he's like, and Jack calls me into his office and he tells a story about office politics.
Oh, okay. I think we have that video.
Yeah,
I think it's the next one. Let's watch.
I'll tell you more.
If you want to be successful, you're going to have to figure out how to get along with everyone. And that includes difficult people. Some people will be looking for a fight. But don't be the one they find it with. Focus on people's good qualities.
God, I have to be honest. I mean, and you can hear the people chanting, pay the riders. Excellent, okay? But at the same time, I will say, I feel so much discomfort, like just, because it's so cringy. It's so cringy. Do you ever watch things that are so cringy that like it makes you kind of sick to your stomach?
Totally.
That's a good example of it.
My son will literally walk out of the room when something like that happens on a TV show or a movie that we're watching because he can't stand the cringe.
Yeah,
okay?
It's so cringy.
So here, what he was telling was that Jack Welch story, and him and this other guy disagreed, and the other guy was trying to knife him in the office politics, and Jack Welch calls him into his office, and he wins the argument, but Jack Welch has this advice for him afterwards saying, hey, there'll always be difficult people, and then people start laughing, right? But he's gonna finish his story, and the story doesn't end well, right? And he says, like, now the trick is to not let those people who are looking to pick a fight find you. Oops. That's exactly what's happening right now. Yeah. He went to go give this speech, giving people an opportunity to find him and make him the face of the strike, right? But Zaslav is a good face for that. And the reason is he's the one leading the cost cutting in the industry. Now they're all doing it, they all agree, but he is a spectacular example of it. As he's putting away $250 million over the last couple of years, he is chopping away at cost, employees, etc. at Discovery, Warner Brothers. Now, if you're wondering why, to answer the question Anna brought up earlier, it doesn't have to do with their core business. Their core business is actually very profitable. So why are they chopping all these people? Because Zaslav made the decision to take on tremendous debt to get this merger done. And since they're saddled with all that debt, the stock market is forcing them, and they're happily doing it, cutting costs so they can say, it's okay, we'll make even more profit so we can pay back the debt. But it's a short-term strategy because like Elon Musk is seeing with Twitter, there's only so much you can chop at your employees before you get strikes, before you get people tuning out. before you get to a point where you've done long-term damage to your brand and to your business. But hey, he's got to make those quarterly earnings every quarter, and that's what his bonus is based on. So he's looking for a big fat bonus this year too after those cuts. And if it destroys Warner Brothers Discovery in the long run, who cares? He won't be there for it.
I think that's a good place to end it. I feel even more sick now. But yeah, it's a great point. I mean, and it really does pour cold water on the myth that as long as you do everything right, as long as you work hard and you're earning the company you're working for a lot of money, you're gonna be safe, your job's gonna be safe. But in this case, because of the merger, it didn't matter.
No, I know for a fact people within the company, in portions of the company that are very, very profitable, that are getting cut anyway because they gotta pay down the debt. And that's just the stone cold fact of finance. So the original sin was taking on that debt to do the merger in the first place. But that's a sin for the shareholders, that's a problem for the company, but it's not a problem for the executives because the bigger their revenue is, the bigger their stock price is, and the more they get paid. So they have an incentive to build these giant, untenable companies and do tremendous damage to them in the short term while they reap the profits, the executives do. And then if the company runs into problems later, like by the way, almost all the retail stores you know, Sears, Kmart, Toys R Us, this happened to all of them. They suck all the money out and they go, oh, I guess the company's failing now, and they kill it.
All right, when we come back from the break, E. Jean Carroll is coming for Trump again.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours of solid, fact-based, timely news and progressive commentary on all the day's most important stories. We keep our viewers informed while also providing perspective and insight on the news we cover so you understand not only what's happening, but also what's happening behind the scenes, the stories behind the stories.
We play musical chairs and put these children in one awful detention facility to the next. That's what's happening at the border.
The things that got him banned, he's still spreading. So presumably, I think it's reasonable to say that if you allow him back on the website, he's going to do it again.
Any legal voter that we deem not willing to vote for my side shouldn't vote because it'll replace me that's supposed to vote for my side. That's not how voting works. That's not how democracy works.
And while many people following today's political news can get discouraged about the direction of the nation and the world, that's not us. At TYT, we're genuinely optimistic about the future, and with good reason. Today, wide majorities of Americans agree with our progressive stances on issues ranging from healthcare and education to climate, immigration, and wages. The rising generation of young people are also overwhelmingly progressive in their political beliefs and policy objectives, and they're increasingly flexing their muscle as voters and activists to demand change from our elected officials. The traditional mainstream media is mostly AWOL. They, along with the government and many other cherished institutions, have been captured by corporate interests. Audiences sense that they're not getting the whole story or even the truth from once trusted outlets, whether broadcasting cable TV news networks or national newspapers and magazines. The antidote is the Young Turks. Unlike mainstream corporate outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to Big Pharma, and we don't carry water for the Republican or Democratic parties. So watch us Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and join the thousands of progressives around the globe who tune in every day for TYT's unmatched, award-winning content and see what it's like to experience a news organization that only answers to you.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter, in this verse. I don't care. I don't care, I don't believe in it, and I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
on the White House lawn. Would that be?
People still don't know what the word feminist actually means. Not even that. People are still angered by the word.
People think feminist is a bad word, but it's not.
There are gradations, there are different waves. The people who are against gender equality love to use like militant feminists as the representatives of all feminists. It's untrue.
I don't know why you'd be threatened by strong women unless you were an incredibly weak man. If you don't have equal rights, or you're not treated the same way, well, wouldn't you be angry?
Turks, Jake and Anna with you guys, and also Melissa Hall. Melissa just joined and became an American hero. And speaking of American heroes, Timothy Pulliam gifted 5 Young Turks memberships. Totally heroic. We really appreciate it. Everybody, you can join up as well at tyt.com/join and get all of our shows anytime you want and help support honest reporting. All right, Anna.
Well, big update on the CNN town hall featuring Trump, because it looks like there's some pretty big consequences for Trump. In response to Donald Trump's disgusting comments about E. Jean Carroll during the CNN town hall with him, Carroll has filed to seek a very substantial sum of additional damages against the former president. Now, before we get to any further details about this new move by E. Jean Carroll, why don't we remember what Trump said during that town hall?
We had this great chemistry, and a few minutes later, we end up in a room, a dressing room of Bergdorf Goodman, right near the cash register. And then she found out there were locks on the door. So she said, I found one that was open. She found one. She learned this at trial. She found one that was open. What kind of a woman meets somebody and brings them up, and within minutes, you're playing hanky-panky in a dressing room, okay? I don't know if he was married then or not. John Johnson, I feel sorry for you, John Johnson.
Mr. President, can I?
No, but think of it.
I know you're recounting what she said, but Mr. President.
But let me just, if I could, because you asked the question.
This was a
just
jury,
so you understand,
though.
if I was walking in at the, because I was very famous then, and I owned the Plaza Hotel right next door, and I owned buildings around it, I'm not going into a dressing room of a crowded department store. Then I say, if she was being raped, and by the way, they said she wasn't raped. Okay, that was her charge. It wasn't.
They found that you sexually abused her.
What? Say what? They did. They said he didn't rape her, and I didn't do anything else either. You know what? Because I have no idea who the hell she is.
But Mr. President,
I don't know who this woman
can I
is.
ask?
I don't know who this woman is. I mean, remember, E. Jean Carroll took him to court in a civil suit, not only because of what he allegedly did to her in a department store, but also because he defamed her after the fact. And apparently, the case was so persuasive to the jurors that they sided with her on the defamation claim especially. So what is the new filing by E. Jean Carroll? Well, according to the New York Times, Monday's filing came in a separate defamation lawsuit that Carroll had filed in 2019 against Trump, which is before the same judge who presided in the civil trial. The older case stemmed from comments Trump made that year, shortly after she said that he had raped her in a Manhattan department store dressing room in the mid-1990s. That lawsuit had been sidetracked by appeals, but is still pending. So Carroll's new filing alleges Trump's defamatory statements following a May 9th verdict show the depth of his malice toward Carroll, since it is hard to imagine defamatory conduct that could possibly be more motivated by hatred, ill will, or spite. Her filing on Monday, meaning today, asks the judge, Lewis Kaplan of Federal District Court, to let her revise her 2019 defamation lawsuit to include the fact of the jury's verdict against Trump, as well as his statements on CNN and others he made about Carroll on his Truth Social platform. Cenk.
Yeah, so look, if she sues him again for defamation on the same issue, I get why she's doing it, because she's saying, look, the whole point of the defamation lawsuit was to shut his ass up about all these lies he's saying about me. And he's not shutting up, so I guess I'm gonna have to sue him again. And I won $5 million last time, I guess I'm gonna have to sue him for more this time so it can actually work. So that's already fair. But I think that the worst thing that Trump said is something extra he added there. And I don't wanna run it, but he, in very crass terms, accused her of being racist against her own husband at the time, John Johnson, right? The one that he mentioned, who's a famous African-American news anchor in New York. I grew up watching him, and he said something terrible about what she said about him. It's Donald Trump, so I have no idea if it's true, but it is very, very unlikely to be true given that it's Donald Trump, right? But I thought, wow, I can't believe he said that after he got sued for defamation, right? And then he went into absurdities. You guys have seen it by now.
He sounded like a lunatic during that town hall.
Look, in that same segment, and I'll say this one just because it's so over the top absurd. I hope that you don't take it seriously. But he said, she's so bad. Her cat is named Vagina. What? I mean, the guy's a lunatic, right? He said that in his CNN town hall.
He did, and even if her cat was named Vagina, like what does
What's
that have
the
to
point?
do? Who cares?
What are you doing, right?
Yeah.
And so,
that must mean you're innocent. Like, okay.
But in his mind, if you're a woman and you flirt with anyone, as he said in that clip that we showed you, you name your cat something he doesn't like, it's like you had it coming.
No,
that's the only reason he would mention those things.
Are you kidding me? According to Trump, if you walk and you're a woman, you had it coming. I mean, he bragged about grabbing women without consent in their genitalia. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come on. You tell on yourself all the time, homeboy. Come on.
So he's doing both things there. He's both defaming her in the ways that we explained, but he's also saying about the verdict on the sexual abuse, like, come on, she says she was flirting with me, and now then she objects when we're in the changing room. So did you do it? Because it sounds like you're saying you did do it.
Exactly. I mean, he just can't help himself, Cenk. Like, that's the thing that, it doesn't even shock me at this point because he does it all the time. He admits to crimes publicly, out loud, all the time.
In fact, in a different part of that CNN town hall, he actually potentially admitted to several different crimes, but another part was about the classified documents that he had in his home in Mar-a-Lago. Caitlin Collins asked him, hey, did you show them to anyone? And he was like, no, I don't remember. I was like, oh my God, he showed them to other people. Okay, it's like so obvious, right? I don't remember the exact words he used, but he basically said like something along the lines of, could be, right? Which means, oh my God, who did he show him to? Who did he show him to? And he said that on national TV.
And by the way,
he's too dumb to lie effectively.
No, 100%.
And he's too dumb to stop lying, which leads to a second defamation suit.
Exactly, which is why I don't begrudge her at all for this new filing. If he's gonna keep making, and by the way, I have no doubt that if she wins in this latest effort, he's gonna do it again. So if you can like milk the guy for whatever he has left, why wouldn't you? I mean, he's the one who keeps finding himself in these situations in the first place because he can't shut his mouth. He loses, he mouths off on Truth Social and during town halls, and it opens up another opportunity to sue him and potentially win significant damages.
Look, he's a perfect recipe for an endless string of defamation lawsuits, not just by her, but by almost anyone he talks about. Because he's A, pathological liar, B, too stupid to realize it, and C, has verbal diarrhea.
He totally does.
Okay, when you combine those three things, just get ready to send all your money to settle defamation lawsuits.
What a disaster. Anyway, speaking of disasters, we also have this.
So when young adults who don't want children are asked why, they often give reasons like personal independence or I just don't want children, very individualistic reasons.
Yeah, individualism to me is a nice way to also frame the concept of selfishness. These are people focusing on their own individual needs and desires as opposed to those of perhaps of a family.
Fox News's Will Cain just demonstrated how unbelievably out of touch wealthy corporate media hosts happen to be, especially when it comes to the topic of why people decide against having children. Now, I have admitted that in some cases it could be selfish. You want the freedom, you want to travel, you don't want to get bogged down by the difficulty of having to raise children. But for the vast majority of Americans who choose to forego raising kids, I think the reason is pretty obvious to the rest of us, and also, surprisingly, News Nation.
Kids are expensive. We've seen birth rates fall in the US since the Great Recession, but research shows that during periods of economic uncertainty, people actually, there are fewer births. Birth rates tend to drop. So it's pretty sad that you have to think as a parent, can I afford to have a kid?
If you don't think that you can take care of a kid that you're gonna bring into the world, that's the main reason I waited long enough.
So we're gonna dig in a little deeper into that argument, which is an accurate argument. But let me also note there are other reasons why, good reasons why people in America decide maybe having kids isn't the best thing to do. I mean, we live in a country where there are endless school shootings where children are slaughtered while they're in class. And the response we get from the very same people over at Fox News who are urging people to have kids is we're not gonna do anything about it because we love our guns. Second Amendment, shut up.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know what to tell them. Maybe consider making this country friendlier to people who are interested in having kids. Because I guarantee you, there are plenty of people who do want to have kids, but they're terrified of the consequences, whether it's financially or otherwise, of doing so.
Okay, so they say these people just want to do what they want to do and believe in individual freedom. Can you believe it? Wait, I thought you guys were running your whole campaigns on freedom. Like, I got the freedom to not wear a mask, it's all about individual freedom. I don't want to have a child that's going to affect my life in a gigantic way. You don't have that freedom, okay? Don't be an individual, do what we tell you. Guys, make up your mind, okay, which one is it? So my thing, my response to like, it's selfish not to have kids. So what?
Yeah, okay, great, so it's selfish.
Yeah, I mean.
I think it's selfish to urge other people to have kids when it has no impact on your life, but it has the biggest impact on the people that you're pushing to have kids. Why would anyone do that, like to appease you? That's not selfish?
Yeah, I gotta say two things. Look, guys, number one, everything is selfish. This whole thing's a ruse. You think what they're doing isn't selfish? By the way, I had kids. And it was selfish. Wait, how? Well, I love those kids. I have a great time with those kids. Those kids didn't ask me to have them. I had them because I thought it was gonna be better for me because I love the idea of having kids.
And Cenk is concerned about his legacy, duh, come on.
Legacy, okay. So everything is selfish, it's just a question of what you want. And are we not supposed to do things that we want? Then my question is, whose desires are we supposed to be fulfilling?
Corporate America's.
Yours, Will Cain, yours, Rando lady on Fox News, the nation, the fatherland. Like, if I don't want kids, well, don't be selfish. You must have the kids for who? Who? Oh, the fatherland needs kids. Corporate America needs more kids in those assembly lines. Get back, don't be selfish. Do this for multinational corporations.
No, but honestly, let's take a step back for a second. The real concern, and they're not saying it out loud, but this is what's really going on. The birth rate is a concern for the future of our economy. And conservatives do not want migrants coming in. They want to avoid or prevent as much migration as possible, as much immigration as possible. And so if Americans aren't having kids, if the birth rate continues to drop, we're not gonna have enough new workers to replace retiring workers. So I get that argument, but pressuring people to have kids in an economy that is not friendly to people, working people, ain't the way to go.
Yeah, but I want to be clear too. Like, we get the logic of that argument, but we don't agree with it.
No, we don't.
Right, so let me think about that, guys. They're like, why do you think it's an accident that all of a sudden Fox is having one segment after another? We've showed you about half a dozen already here on this show, where they're like, you need to have more babies, have the babies. Okay, oh, you guys are being just outrageous by not having, get in there, go, 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 go. right? Jesse Waters doing endless segments about now you got to make love and you got to get married, and I don't care if you're 18 or lower. I don't care.
The tire slasher wants you to make love,
right? And so you got to get in there and create more babies. Why are they saying that? Because they're talking to a largely white, right-wing audience on Fox News. And so Anna's right. We could have as many workers as those corporations need, just like that. You just loosen immigration a tiny bit, legal immigration, right? You do it the right way. What America's done for its entire history.
Yep.
But they don't want brown people, they want more white people. And I'm not talking about corporations. Corporations don't give a damn about their skin color. They just care about how low they pay you, right?
100%.
Right? But for the right-wing folks, they need more white babies. That's why they're yelling at their white audience, get in there and create more of them.
So again, the best thing you can do to, encourage people to have children is make the conditions, the economic conditions, favorable for individuals who are considering having children. So how much does it cost to raise a kid in the United States? The numbers have been going up. So if you do not take into account the cost of education, meaning the cost of college, possibly private school, stuff like that, you just focus on the basics, the average cost of raising a kid in the United States from birth to 17 years old is a whopping $300,000. And let's break that down even more. In fact, that's what happens in this next video. Let's watch.
Just the estimated annual family expenses for that now second grader, they've gone up from around $12,500, which you're already thinking, I'd like to pay a little bit less when that person was born, up to more than $18,270 a year. So that is an increase in that little bit of time of 45%. Nobody likes that. As any parent will tell you, those first years are typically the most expensive because of things like diapers and formula. That's stuff you're obviously not buying at age 7, yet the costs still skyrocketing. But then you get into the everyday things like grocery and childcare. These things are up 25%. Okay, that is a little bit harder to deal with, all right? The average home price and health insurance, this is the big whammy, the triple whammy, if you will. Family of 4, these costs are up more than 40%. 40%.
But that's not taken into account during these discussions on Fox or any other show that urges people to have kids because of the low birth rate in the United States. So just to reiterate what was mentioned there. Back in 2015, if you're looking at a second grader, how much it costs to take care of a second grader in 2015? It was $12,500 for 1 year, just 1 year. Fast forward to 2022 when that data came out. So $18,270 in 2022 to raise a second grader for just 1 year. Just 1 year. Okay, so then we know those numbers. That sounds like a lot of money. That is a lot of money. But let's take a broader look at what the economy looks like for ordinary Americans, because there's new data out using census data. And here's what they found. About 38.5% of American adults, or 89.1 million people in the United States, face difficulty in paying for usual home expenses between April 26th and May 8th, according to the latest Household Pulse survey. That's up from 34.4% just a year ago and 26.7% during the same period in 2021. So in other words, the financial situation on the ground for ordinary people in America has gotten a lot worse. But there's more. In 15 states, more than 4 in 10 adults live in households where it has been somewhat or very difficult to pay for usual household expenses in the last 7 days. And in some metro areas, such as Los Angeles and Riverside, California, almost half of households are struggling. And finally, what are people doing when they're struggling? Where do they go? How do they pay for their basic needs? Well, they turn to credit cards at a time when interest rates are incredibly high. More than 25 million households say they used credit cards or obtained a loan to meet spending needs, and that's up from 22.4 million a year earlier, and that is precisely why consumer debt is at record levels as we speak.
So Anna gave you that stat a little bit earlier, but I want to focus on it. The $310,000 that kids cost these days on average in America for their lifetimes. Everybody got $310,000 lying around? You're gonna have 2 kids. You got $620,000 lying around. Okay, and by the way, that's on average. If you live in the large cities like LA, New York, et cetera, and you saw that in some of the numbers Anna also gave you, it's way higher, right? So you got $1 million laying around to have a couple of kids in a large city in America. Well, because of how much corporate rule has sucked our wages out and brought them to a bare minimum, while our productivity is still sky high, well, we don't have the money. And then Fox News comes and yells at you for being selfish. I mean, how is that for irony? Because the corporations took all of the money and took it home. It's in my book, Justice is Coming. I explained from 1978, the Supreme Court decisions on to now, that they moved trillions of dollars that would have gone to your wages into corporate profits. And then after they took all the money and you don't have any money for kids, they go, what's the matter with you? Why didn't you get back in there and have the kids and just suffer more, okay? Because I need more workers. And you see how it's you being selfish? No, I don't see it. Of course you're gonna think twice if this is how much it costs, because that could devastate you. Who the hell can afford it? That's what they should be talking about instead of yelling at their own audience.
We're gonna take a break. When we come back, we will probably skip the next story and move on to, what should we talk about, Jake? No, we gotta talk about coital recall. Tim Scott, he's running for president. But is he still a virgin? The American people deserve to know.
Like a bag of sand.
That's funny. All right, check out Nina Turner in 2 places. One, tonight, she's on Chris Cuomo's show on News Nation. So that's in the 8 o'clock hour. So make sure you catch her there. And of course, check her out on Unbossed, her show right here on the TYT network. It's on live every day at 4 o'clock Eastern. But you can check out any of the clips by going to youtube.com/unbossedTYT or using that QR code right there on the screen. And don't forget to check out our podcasting network as well, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's go back to our members. Turkosaurus Rex says, it's repulsive how giddy and gleeful the mainstream media is over this escalation. They've never met a war they didn't love. That is indisputable. Whether you think we should or shouldn't, the media is like, finally, the F16s have been unleashed, yes! Their excitement for it is a little weird. Although Jake Tapper did do a good job of asking about the accounting problem at the Pentagon. Rich Thurman said, Cenk and Anna are 100% right. The Pentagon corruption has been going on forever. Shelby wrote in, I'm shocked that Jake Tapper, of all people, is asking the Defense Department a challenging question, even though he chose to frame it in the softest way possible. But hey, credit where credit is due. I probably pick on Jake Tapper more than any other cable news anchor, but that was a good question. I'm glad he asked it. Eclectic Miscellanea says, thank you so much, Cenk, for breaking down this accounting error. I knew something shady was going on, but not one report I've seen anywhere else has questioned whether or not this really was an error, much less explained that it's a scheme to fleece taxpayers out of even more money for war. It is kind of stunning, guys. I mean, lately I've been reading mainstream media articles and remembering that I know how to take out their bias, right? And just look for the facts, just like Noam Chomsky says, right? And I was like, wow, if you read these articles without knowing that, holy cow, they're just outright propaganda. Like none of the articles I read, and I read tons of articles about this Ukraine surge, right? None of them said, by the way, we did these kind of surges in Iraq, they never worked. This is what the Pentagon says, but the Pentagon is often wrong. No, they just take whatever the Pentagon says and pretend it's totally real. Like they don't even have caveats in most of the stories. There's like article after article with exactly the same kind of thing, not just about Ukraine, in almost all these stories. It's way worse than even I say it is, and I say it's really bad. Mountain Dragon writes in, I would love for Jen Carana to have Trump in a town hall. Unfortunately, for the reason and reality, he's too much of a wuss. He'd never get in the ring with either one of them. Look, guys, we shouldn't be the only one doing it, and Mehdi Hassan does a good job as well. But yes, when politicians go on shows, you're supposed to challenge them, and not just Donald Trump. And we've done that every time, and that's why a lot of them don't want to come back on. But that's how you're supposed to do journalism, okay? Trista says, when someone acts in their own self-interest and financial interest as an individual and do what is best for them without harm to anyone else is the definition of an invisible hand of the market. Fox News dumbasses don't even know their own ideology. Great point. Back on TYT, Jake, Anna, and Judy with you guys. Judy just became a member by hitting the join button below the video on YouTube. We appreciate it. You could also do it at tyt.com/join. Anna. Well,
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott has thrown his name in the hat for the presidential race. He is planning to run for in the Republican primaries, and the American people want to know: is he in fact still a virgin? Well, one reporter wanted to know, and that reporter is Ben Terris. Apparently, he revealed that he once asked the Republican presidential candidate whether he was still a virgin, and there was good reason to ask that question. But first, let's back up a little bit to kind of understand what this story is really about. So Scott is a Republican senator, a very conservative one representing South Carolina. He's also the only Black Republican senator, period. Now, today, he officially announced that he will be running for president in 2024. His campaign is just now starting, but he has a long way to go to catch up to Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis if he manages to be able to do that. Now, the most current polling coming from Morning Consult found that Scott is getting just 1% of the vote from Republican primary voters. So again, he's got a long way to go. And speaking of Donald Trump, he reacted to Scott's announcement very differently from how he reacted to Ron DeSantis potentially running. He hasn't announced yet, he's expected to announce. Here's what he wrote on Truth Social. Good luck to Senator Tim Scott in entering the Republican presidential primary race. It is rapidly loading up with lots of people, and Tim is a big step up from Ron DeSanctimonious, who is totally unelectable. I got opportunity zones, done with Tim, a big deal that has been highly successful. Good luck, Tim. Okay. So obviously he doesn't see Tim Scott as a threat, which is why he's so friendly to Tim Scott, and also used this as an opening to throw a few more jabs at Ron DeSantis, which I think is hilarious.
So before we get to Tim Scott's virginity, I love that message from Trump. It's a pat on the head. Way to enter the race, Tim. It's nice to have you here.
Good luck.
Yeah, if he thought Tim Scott was 1% of a danger to him, he'd be like, oh, this Tim Scott's a rhino. He doesn't even like Mar-a-Lago. There's something wrong with him. Okay, have you heard what he calls his cat? It's totally unacceptable. Okay, I'm calling him Tim Scott Tape. Okay, because that's what he is. So no, obviously he thinks Tim Scott's a joke.
He's getting 1% at the moment, 1% of Republican primary voters.
He's not. Of course, he's a joke. Of course, he's not going to win. Yeah. Guys, look, anybody can beat Biden. Not anybody can beat
Anybody
Trump.
can be beat.
Yeah, but not anybody can beat Trump in a Republican primary. Okay.
Yeah.
In order to beat Trump in a Republican primary, you got to come real strong. You think Tim Scott, whose whole career is based on white people, you're right, blacks are not that great. You think that guy is going to beat Donald Trump? No, he's not. It's not even going to come close.
So Scott is very conservative, okay? So the Susan B. Anthony Foundation, Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America gave him an A rating, although he's kind of waffling on when he would ban abortion, right? So,
ooh, okay. I mean, don't worry, it's getting banned. It's just a question of when, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Monday or Tuesday.
But Scott, much like every other politician, likes to test the waters and has seen that the reversal of Roe v. Wade did not bode well for the Republican primary for Republican candidates in the midterms. And so he's not as vociferous against abortion these days, but nonetheless, he's got some fat pockets apparently. He's been planning to run for president and he's been fundraising already. So after Scott won re-election to the Senate in November, his campaign committee still had $22 million in cash on hand that can now be used to bolster his presidential candidacy. According to the FEC, Scott's existing funds represent the largest sum of money that any US presidential candidate has ever had when launching a campaign.
Irrelevant.
So to be fair, I mean, you're right, but to be fair, he didn't fundraise that money specifically to run for president. He did it for his re-election campaign for the Senate, but he does have that giant wad of cash ready to go for this presidential run.
Which, by the way, explains why mainstream media takes him seriously, because he's gonna spend that cash on mainstream media ads. So they're like, Tim Scott, very important person, has entered the race. I mean, you never know, he could win, he could win. You'll have to see his ads first though.
His what?
His ads.
Oh my God.
Not his abs.
I thought you said ass. I'm like, what?
Okay, well, we're gonna get to that though, isn't it?
We don't need to see that. All right, anyway, so let's get to the whole virgin stuff. Like, why did that even come up? So as a conservative, Scott, especially in like the 1990s, loved to give these speeches about the importance of abstinence, waiting until you're married. Okay, so Scott, who frequently talks about his faith, plans to focus heavily on the evangelical Christian vote in Iowa, the first in the nation caucus state, where he has held meetings with pastors in recent months, according to his advisors. Are we seriously going to pretend like evangelical voters give a damn about being chaste? About like literal conservative values?
None, zero.
Come on, guys.
The only thing they care about is how much do you own the libs? And is Tim Scott going to own the libs harder than Trump does?
I'm just saying.
I got news for you, he ain't.
I'm just saying, after evangelical voters and just whatever, evangelical power players, if you want to call them that, were willing to like turn a blind eye to Trump's indiscretions, if you want to call it that. Like, come on.
His raw dog antics with porn stars.
Come on, guys.
They're like, oh, you went raw dog on a couple of porn stars. Oh, no, that's right after thou shalt not covet. Well, okay, yeah, we never meant any of it.
So let's get back to Ben Terris, okay? Because he had an exchange with Scott back in 2012, and that's what he's reminding us all about through the context of a Twitter thread. He writes, Tim Scott will be the first presidential candidate I've ever asked about the status of his virginity. Initial answer, quote, I'm not talking about my sex life with Ben Terris. Then he stood up and said, I have to go potty.
Okay, so that was from 2012, okay, to be fair. So we don't know how much Tim Scott has been down to get the friction on since then, okay? But apparently he didn't want to talk about it back then. Still not married though. I mean, I hope you're keeping that abstinence up, Tim, because you've been lecturing all other people about it.
No, I hope he's not. I think if he's still a virgin, that is a liability at this point. Like, there's something, no, come on. Like, honestly, in the eyes of the average American voter, I don't even know how old Tim Scott is, but he's too old to be a virgin. And no offense to the virgins out there, but like.
So look, I joke around about the incels all the time. We say like, oh, we're involuntarily celibate. Yeah, no crap, Sherlock, right? Yeah, we were all involuntarily celibate. And so, and in this case, like, if you're voluntarily celibate, brother, don't do it. Don't do it, okay? You're gonna explode. Just go have fun, life is short. If you're involuntarily celibate, well, of course, we feel your pain, and you're trying. Okay, God bless you, keep going, right?
Yeah.
So in this case though, of course, he's saying, no, don't have sex if you're not married. God does not like that. Oh, well, it's taken a while though, so I kind of had to do it, you know what I'm saying?
Okay, so yeah, let's get to graphic 7 here, okay? Because the third tweet that I think is relevant to this says the following. One more thing. It was such an awkward question to ask that I wrote myself a script. You used to preach about the virtue of no sex until marriage. Is that a virtue that you still adhere to today? Ultimately, he implied he did not, to which I say, thanks God, okay? And then he says, quote, I just wish we all had more patience.
Well, then stop lecturing other people about it. Problem solved. Like the minute you have sex outside of marriage, you shut it. You zip it. That's what you do.
But to be fair to Tim Scott, and I think, I never thought I would say this, but the entirety of the traditional conservative movement in the country, I really haven't seen much in regard to like no knocking boots until you're married, because people are getting married so much later in life. So really, you want like a 35-year-old waiting until they get married to?
Well, but that's the thing. So that's why
we need more love in the country, okay, not less. And look, I'm not talking about teenagers. Like I get the conservative ideology of encouraging teenagers to remain, to practice abstinence until marriage, even though like it's not gonna work, but nonetheless, okay, I get it in that context. At least why they want that in that context. But we're talking about grown-ass adults.
No, well, two things about that. One is Tim Scott is a rare politician who's still hell-bent on it. So,
is he really?
Like he's talking his whole career. He rose up talking about these kind of issues. That's why evangelicals are theoretically excited about him, although they don't even know who he is. But that's his thing. That's been his shtick for a long time. Like, oh, we're gonna do this the godly way, okay? No gay people, and don't do an abortion because God's in favor of it, but still we're pretending he's not, okay? And you guys, everybody stay celibate. You're not allowed to have sex. And then he goes off and runs off, and of course he has sex on his. And because, why? Because of course, you'd be crazy not to. And Anna, like since I'm a little bit older than you, my whole life I've heard this ideology like way more than you guys have. You're right, they've kind of let it go recently.
Yeah,
right?
I remember when I was a teenager coming up and just seeing the differences between the state that I grew up in, California, versus like some of these red states like Mississippi that were just aggressively pushing for abstinence-only sex ed, which was a disaster in Mississippi. It had the highest teen pregnancy rate of the country.
100%, not only is it dumb, but it doesn't work. It's counterproductive, at least a more teen pregnancy, because you're trying to deny reality. But I got married at 38.
Can you imagine?
Can you imagine if I was stupid enough to listen to right-wingers? Like, no guys, hold on, I'm 37, but I'm gonna get it right on the, when I get married at 38, man, it's gonna be spectacular. No, don't waste your life, no way. Don't listen to these crazy people, go out and have fun. Once you're past 18.
Be responsible, by the way, be responsible,
sure, of
obviously. But I mean, look, to me, do whatever you want, but be responsible. Let's just put it that way. For right-wingers who still abide by this ideology, who still push this kind of thought process onto other people, just don't be so concerned about what other people are doing in the bedroom. Just mind your own business. And if you're 38, you should not be a virgin, okay?
Yeah, I hope to God you're not. Okay, last thing on this is that-
unless you're a nun, which I get it. I mean, I don't agree with it, but I get it.
No, just leave, then have sex, and then do whatever you're gonna do with your life. Okay, last thing is, like, oh, is this an inappropriate question, Tim Scott? No, it's a perfectly appropriate question. If you're gonna go around telling everybody else to be celibate, the guy gets to ask you if you're celibate.
Exactly. All right, an update on Andrew Tate when we return.
If men grow up to be like me, you're gonna have a whole bunch of people with no criminal record.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go to YouTube members. Aquarius Dragon asks, how are they gonna have more babies born then? Fair, and that's why they're in such a cold panic. I think, if I remember, Jesse Waters did a segment where he was like, I'm not sure that it even matters that you're married. Like, just please have more white babies, okay? But But generally speaking, they're trying to get you married. That's why they're passing those laws saying now people can get married under the age of 18.
Oh, God,
right?
don't do that.
Because they want you to be married, and then who cares if you're having sex? Go, go, go. In fact, we want you to have it. Jokey Smurf.
Look, I know we have some young audience members, and I don't mean to insult you. I just want to let you know you're going to change a lot from 18 to 30. A lot. You're going to be a completely different person. I guarantee it. Don't get married at 18. Please don't do it.
That's crazy.
I mean, you're setting yourself up for a disaster of epic proportions.
Yeah.
There's some people, very, very few, who are like high school sweethearts, and then they get married and they somehow survive. Like, those people amaze me. That is the exception, not the rule.
Yep, totally. Jokey Smurf writes in with a curious analogy. Asking a conservative to not be a hypocrite is like asking a dog not to poop. Okay, I'm amused by that. Not Equipped says, nothing wrong with being a virgin, but if he isn't, then he has no business trying to force his religious ideology on the country. Ding, 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 we have a winner, that's exactly right. The Freedom House 1984 says, Anna has a great Trump voice.
He likes to do this like little whisper, like this soft whisper. I like to talk, in hushed, whispery tones, except for when I say China.
I was wondering where you were going to get the China or Norway.
Norway.
Tim Crocker asks, has South Carolina Senator Tim Scott called out his own governor, Henry McMaster, for saying, quote, I look forward to the day Democrats are so rare, we have to hunt them with dogs. Now,
it's a disgusting statement.
Of course, Tim Scott hasn't called that out. Of course, no Republican has called that out. That's par for the course for the Republican Party. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's going around going, I just want the Republicans to be stronger. I love my Republican friends so much. He did it again. They asked him about the debt ceiling. And he's like, oh, I love negotiating with Republicans are great, great, great. I love Republicans. Meanwhile, the other side's like, let's hunt them down with dogs and rip their face off. And everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's totally fine.
By the way, I believe Biden. I believe that he does love his, he does love Republicans because they're a convenient excuse to engage in the austerity that he himself wants to engage in.
Of course, he loves Republicans because he is a Republican. The cynic writes in, selfishness is bad. Didn't your hero Ayn Rand say selfishness is the best way to live? Hypocrite. Totally. That rugged individualism, that's Ayn Rand defined, right? That's the whole point, and that's what the right-wing ideology is based on. And then all of a sudden, that when you don't want to have kids, they're like, no, we hate individualism. What the Hess writes in, Cenk and Anna are spot on with their analysis. Ooh, I like this member. Okay, Disco Biscuit writes in, all of this is true, you make great points. However, Ukraine is not going to defeat Russia without those jets, and that's the truth. That might be right, but by the way, they're not necessarily going to defeat them with the jets.
Exactly.
All of this is leading to
more death,
a very long war. All right, we'll be back.
China, Norway.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Jack Wolverton, which is an awesome name. Jack, thanks for being part of us now. Anna.
Well, we've got some updates on Andrew Tate, and the New York Times actually has a pretty good write-up on what he's up to. So let's discuss. Andrew Tate is out on bail after Romanian authorities arrested him after they had alleged that he engaged in trafficking women for sex. Now, the New York Times reported on how and why Andrew Tate and his brother ended up getting investigated by Romanian law enforcement. And I think the piece is interesting to say the least. So the Romanian authorities had arrested Tate and his younger brother Tristan in December on charges of human trafficking, rape, and forming an organized criminal group. Now, both men deny any wrongdoing. They were held in a prison for 3 months, in Bucharest to be specific, before being released under house arrest, where they are currently awaiting trial. So as the Times reports, prosecutors accused Tate of luring women to his compound and then putting them to work under duress as performers on pornographic webcams. Tate's lawyer said that Tate said the Tate brothers are famous, they are rich, they are young and beautiful, adding, what would be their interest in forcing women to act as slaves? I don't know, Jake, what would their interest be in doing such a thing?
Money. among other things. And how do I know that? Because they say it on tape all the time.
That's their lawyer? That's the defense?
Yeah, I mean, good luck with that defense. There's your clients all over the internet endlessly saying like, oh, you lure them in and you flirt with them and you trick them and you get them to think that you love them, and then you turn them into basically slaves and you get them to perform sex and then give you the money. Okay, I don't know how you're gonna make the jury not see those tapes.
I mean, that's the thing with Tate, right? I mean, much like Trump, he can't help himself. He loves to admit to things publicly, and all of those admissions will be used against him in a court of law, hopefully in Romania. So the now defunct website for one of Tate's businesses or business ventures, an online academy offering a PhD program in techniques for getting girls, boasted that Tate owns and operates strip clubs and webcam studios and has top quality women living with him and making him money full time. I guess that's the reason why Tate would do such a thing to his lawyer, who seems confused about it or pretends to be confused about it. The sales pitch for the program, which charged more than $400 for enrollment, promised to teach students how to build an army of women who are so loyal to you that they allow you to have as many girls as you want. Okay, what's funny about all of this is that Tate thought that Romania would be this lawless playground that he could take advantage of, and he would brag openly about that. So Romania, according to the State Department's 2022 report on human trafficking, unfortunately, remains a primary source country for sex trafficking in Europe. But before his arrest, Tate said he liked living in countries where corruption is accessible to everybody and where anybody can pay a $50 bribe to get out of a speeding ticket.
Oops.
Good admissions, good admissions. It's really working out for you. But since Tate established that Romania, it would be his base back in 2016, the country's anti-trafficking agency has actually expanded its staff. They're a little bit better about tamping down on human trafficking, although there's still room for a lot more improvement, clearly. So officials in Romania have also gone further in tapping down on human trafficking by stepping up cooperation with other European countries. So they're enhancing communication with other European countries. They're also establishing a dedicated unit to combat sex trafficking by organized crime and terrorism, by the Organized Crime and Terrorism Investigation Directorate. That's the name of the agency that they're using for this. The directorate last year opened 1,246 new trafficking investigations, and that's double the number from 2021.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what Tate's actual crime is, and I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. First, let me explain that getting a conviction is not going to be as easy as you might suspect, because they have to prove not that they're just doing the sex work, but that they're doing it involuntarily.
Right, it's against their will.
Right, it's against their will. And he does have some of those women hoodwinked, and they are reluctant to testify against them. And so if they don't testify against him, or if they testify, hey, I did it perfectly voluntarily, then he's gonna get off. And so that's just real. And by the way, it's not impossible that they did it voluntarily, but then you get into questions of what's voluntary and what's not in a cult-like environment. But that's all going to be, depending on their justice system, might be difficult to prove. So I'm just keeping real with you guys, so that, because a lot of times in the media, you'll see an allegation and think, oh, it's over, Andrew Tate's going to jail.
No, it's definitely not over.
Yeah.
And by the way, let me be clear about one other thing. We don't know how many of these women were under duress, right? Or were forced, right? There could be some women who totally signed on to it, they consented to it, they had no problem with it. There could be women who did not consent to it and were forced into it. And so all of that stuff, obviously it needs to be proven. Like you can't just assume it and convict someone based on assumptions. So we'll see how it plays out. But it is interesting that Tate on multiple occasions disclosed why he moved his operation to Romania in the first place, and it's because he thought that it would just be this lawless playground where he can get away with anything.
Right, so that leads me to his actual crimes. One is, one of the girls is American, and her mom is on a warpath from Florida, and so likely the American government put a lot of pressure on the Romanian government. So that sucks that he probably would have gotten away with it if he hadn't done it to an American girl. But that's a huge part of why he's being pursued, it appears. And then the second part of it is insulting Romania. So, well, that's not an actual crime, but yeah, insulting a cop isn't a crime either. See how that turns out for you here in America. And I know from the old country, if you go around making fun of the country that you're in, you're gonna be in a world of trouble. I know that if he had gone to Turkey and was like, oh, it's so easy because Turkish people are so corrupt, you're gonna get arrested right away. Okay.
I mean, yeah. Also because Turkey doesn't like anyone saying anything bad about them.
But that's true for all of them. You think the Romanians like people saying bad things about them?
I know, but I know.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Turks are particularly touchy, but trust me, everybody's touchy. So the minute he said that, he put a giant target on his chest, right? Like he's basically spitting in the face of his host country, and that's just dumb. And that's really what defines Andrew Tate more than anything else.
And by the way, legal experts, including this law lecturer who spoke to the Times for this story, agrees with you that the involvement of a mother from the United States is what really led to this investigation in the first place. She says, without pressure from the United States to investigate, I'm not sure Romanian prosecutors would ever have touched him. So there's that. And finally, what's Tate's reaction to all of this, including the prosecution, the investigation? Well, he likes to be a little melodramatic and also likes to, dip his toe into insane conspiracy theories. So a day after armed police stormed his compound, he told his followers on Twitter, who now number, Jesus Christ, 6.6 million, that the Matrix sent their agents. The Matrix, in Tate's catch-all designation for what he sees as a conspiracy by woke corporate elites, mainstream politicians, and feminists to emasculate men. That's really what this is all about. There is this concerted effort, this orchestrated effort by various agencies to emasculate men.
Cool. He's on tape bragging about how he tricks all of these women and then makes them work for him. One of the women that might testify against him talked about how it was definitely involuntary. Other witnesses talked about how they saw it was involuntary. But it was corporations who give a rat's ass about Andrew irrelevant Tate, and because they wanted to be woke and emasculate Tate, who they've never heard of and don't care about at all.
Right.
That's why they launched the Matrix agents to go get him.
Obviously.
But the sad thing about that is that, like, the world's gotten so crazy that a whole bunch of people probably believe that. They probably think like, oh man, because Andrew is good at manipulating women and ruining their lives and turning them into sex slaves.
By the way, is that
just because of that, the corporate elites are out to get him.
Is that what masculinity is to you, by the way, if you believe that? That's what masculinity is?
Well,
I think that's bitch behavior, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So, all right, in our post game, Marjorie Taylor Greene's new boyfriend has got some issues. We're gonna straighten out those issues for her. You're gonna enjoy that. Is it the tantric sex crew? I don't know, let's find out. TYT.com/join to become a member, or if you're on YouTube, at the join button below, get you that beautiful bonus episode.
Is anyone in the country more obsessed with Marjorie Greene's tantric sex guru boyfriend than Cenk Uygur?
No, it's like the American people want to know because she's very big on family values.
Is she?
So I want to know what kind of family she values. So we'll find out in the post game. The bonus episode is just for the members, and you guys get all the material we do there first and early as well. And then finally, the whales strike back. Yeah, orcas, killer whales, now attacking boats because we mess with them too much. Yeah. I mean, we kind of had it coming, let's be honest.
They are called killer whales.
Yeah, just mess with them and see how it turns out. Well, we're seeing how it turns out. Okay, so time for just 2 comments here. One is from Twitch, a really good point. Mayhem Mendez said, this is about EJ and Carol, her cat was named after an Austin Powers character. A lot of vagina, and Trump's too dumb to understand it. That is hilarious. That's exactly what I thought, but I didn't know it, right? I'm like, no, I bet you it's named after that character, and of course you're right. And then I got one more I got to read for you guys. Squirrely Siege says about Trump's reaction to Tim Scott, my only real takeaway from this is that Trump is still trying to get the sanctimonious to stick. That horse is dead. Stop hitting it. Okay. Totally agreed. That is the main takeaway. We'll see you in the bonus episode.
The concept of the Young Turks means the audience, they are the Young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing